Welcome, everybody, to Rise of the Phoenix Coach. I'm Amy, a nurse, trauma informed coach, and someone who's walked through the fire and chose to rise. Before we begin, a quick note. This podcast includes real, unfiltered conversation about trauma, addiction, mental health, and recovery. Some topics may feel intense or triggering. Please listen with care and take breaks if needed. And always honor where you are in your own journey. This space is not about perfection. It's about truth, healing, and it's about rising again and again. If you've ever felt broken, lost, or stuck in survival mode, you're not alone and you're not beyond repair. Here, we turn pain into power. We rewrite old stories and we reclaim the parts of ourselves that were never meant to lose. This is Rise of the Phoenix Coach. And I'm very excited today to introduce my very first guest. This is Deante Young. He is a best-selling author, a storyteller, and a founder of Dirty Truth Publishing. He specializes in helping people preserve their stories that shaped their lives, their legacy, and he's known for bringing honesty, humor, and depth into any conversation. So with that, Mr. Deante Young, how are you today?
Wow, I don't know if I can do better than that. Everything you said is just going to trump whatever I say, but I am feeling very blessed right now. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So tell me, I want to give people a little bit of background about our relationship and how we've met. So we met in July of this last year on LinkedIn, and I reached out to you. Tell our audience a little bit about how that went and how that made you feel.
Yeah, it was July 2025. I'll never forget. I came home from a family function. It was late at night, and I had been drinking, which was pretty cool. So I looked and I saw in my email someone that said that they were interested in speaking with me, and they were very, very transparent about everything they were saying. And I said, wow, this is exceptional, because most people are not transparent, especially people that you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that person happened to be you, and you just laid the dirty truth right out in the fullness of what you were feeling. And you talked about how you aspire to have a book, you aspire to work with me, you aspire to even being on the podcast that I had at the time, which is The Dirty Truth with Deante Young. And I really admired that. I felt a wave of excitement, because it's almost never that I receive those types of correspondence. So that was a flashpoint moment for me, because what it did was it made it clear that the things that I've put out into the world are attracting the right people to my ecosystem. And I feel like your network is the thing that is very, very important, and it's very invaluable. So that's pretty much how I felt.
God, I love that. Thank you. Don't make me cry in this episode, because you do that to me at times.
Wow.
Deante, you've become a very good friend of mine, and I appreciate you more than you know. So I just want you to know that. And now I'm going to wipe away the tears. No, I'm not. So tell me a little bit about why the dirty truth. Why was that? I mean, that's kind of how I know you. That's your brand. What made you come up with that idea, with that brand?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So in 2006, which is what, 20 years ago?
Yeah, long time ago.
Wow. Long time. 2006, this was really the embryonic stages of that, and I did not realize it. But in 2006, I decided that I wanted to do a television series, but the problem is I did not know anyone in Hollywood or anything like that. And so then I just started thinking, man, if I just knew how to write a television show, maybe I can put it on the internet. That led me to a bookstore, and I was looking for books on how to write television shows. And what I instead found was a book on how to write screenplays. So, in other words, movie scripts. So I got really immersed in that. And then it just made me think about how I wanted to have my own show, and I can still do it myself. I just couldn't do it like on broadcast television because at the time I didn't have context like that. So I learned how to write screenplays. I got really good at it. And then I just still couldn't shake the itch of wanting to have my own show. So I thought about doing a show where I would interview people, but be very brutally honest in the line of questioning I would give people. And I thought about it like because the way I spoke to people was almost like an interview, but it was really a conversation just in regular life. I'd
Yeah.
be at a grocery store and I would say, "Hey, what do you think about this brand of milk versus that?" And it was almost like an interview, but so that was interesting. So I said,
I can see you doing that.
yeah. So that evolved into thinking of, oh, I got the perfect title for an online show. And I said, I know what I'll do because I'm going to be very much in your business, not because I'm trying to be nosy, but because I learned a long time ago that the way people think is fascinating and it will surprise you. And there's always something to learn. So, with that being said, I said, how about I call this show Invasion of Privacy? And so that was my plan was to where I would go up to people and just say, hey, what do you think about this? And it'd be very personal questions.
Mhm.
But then, ironically, this was long before Donald Trump became a politician. But I read a book by Donald Trump that was called Think Big, and it came out in 2007. And so in his book, he gave the advice to entrepreneurs. He said, you should name things with your name because when you have a product and you have your name in it, people are going to have to say your name all the time and then they'll remember you. So I
Yeah.
said, okay, well, I don't want to call this Invasion of Privacy because it doesn't have my name in it. So I said, I want to do a show. And I was inspired by Howard Stern and I was inspired by Hugh Hefner because they are very, very envelope pushing people. And I consider myself to be that. So taking Trump's advice, I decided to go through all these names to name my show. And I finally settled on the name A Date with Deante. And so that was a web series that I created. I filmed the first parts of the episodes in 2007, but it did not come out until 2008. And I was so excited. April 18th, 2008, it came out. I put it out on MySpace and on YouTube. And I was so excited because I had interviewed this girl. And the first question I asked her was, I said, what do you think of Negroes? It was a white girl. I said, what do you think of Negroes? And I just I had the camera right in her face. And the reason why I asked such a direct question was because I've known for a long time that we often talk about people that are different from us or different races or different genders from us. We talk differently when we are amongst the same. So like
Mhm.
people will talk differently about black people when they're in the presence, and the same thing with black people will talk differently about white people. So I wanted to get to the bottom. I wanted to bring that to the surface. And after doing these episodes, my first season of A Date with Deante was 20 episodes. And I was so excited at everything I was able to uncover. I was just thinking, man, these people, they ain't just telling the truth, man. They're telling the damn dirty truth. And then I was like, wait a minute. I was like, so I'm gonna come back for a second season and I'm gonna form a production company called this Dirty Truth Films. And so that's what it was called, Dirty Truth Films, because I was asking some very direct questions. The third episode of A Date with Deante is what made everyone around me and in the neighborhood I was in just take notice because it was a young woman who I had met a long time before that. I met her when she was a teenager. I was a teenager, but now she was 27 years old. And she had told me that she was pregnant. And I said, wait a minute, you're pregnant, but how long you been pregnant? She said like 6 months. I said, well, I've seen you like probably about 5 months ago and you were doing cocaine. And then she says, yeah. She said, well, when I found out that I was pregnant, I did crack to celebrate. I
Oh,
said,
yeah.
what? So when she said that, I was so blown away. And I said, can you please come on my show? And at
Mhm.
the time, I had only had 2 episodes. She was a third episode. The first two were sort of forgettable. But beginning in that episode, the third episode, this 27-year-old woman, I was asking her the most direct questions. In other words, I was extracting her dirty truth. I said, how many people have you been with in your entire career? And I called it a career. And then she said, sexually? I said, yeah. And then she says, probably about 200. Now she was 27 years old at the time.
Wow.
And then I was just like, I got better and better. So I used the Howard Stern tactics of just saying the most shocking, controversial things. And I remember saying to her, I said, listen, you are mother of the year. You really are. And I was being sarcastic, but I was saying I was playing it for comedy, but I also wanted there to be a message in there like, hey, you guys see this? This is a reflection of you. Some of you is going to be reflected in this.
Yeah.
And so in season two, it just skyrocketed. And it went from me going around with my camera, hoping that somebody will let me film them, random people on the street, to by the time I got to the middle of season two, I kid you not, guys would contact me and they would say, hey, my girlfriend wants to show you her boobs on camera. Can you do that? And I was just like, perfect. Yeah. And so
Okay.
so people have had sex on the show. They've done drugs on the show. They've this woman even slit her wrist on the show,
Mm.
and she was 18 years old. And I said, I said, why are you doing this? And then she says, well, because the way I'm going, I'm not going to live very long. I said, what? And then she says, yeah. I was like, holy smokes. I mean, that was my catchphase, holy smokes.
Yeah. She
And
was serious. Yeah.
yeah, it was really interesting. She was 18. She says that she probably won't make it to 40. And the show became very controversial. It got to a point where even in season three, people were sending me death threats on social media because they were saying that I was exploiting people. I was making people look bad. And
Oh,
what I
wow.
would always say, I would always start off in season one and say, this is not exploitation, this is education. But then I said, you know what? I am exploiting people. I'm exploiting the words and actions of consenting adults. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I said, and I would always tell people, I would say, listen, you have a problem with it, but what you really have a problem is their answer, not my question. Because if I ask a girl, hey, how many people have you been with? And she says two, you're not going to think that's exploitive. But if she says 200, like the girl did, then you're going to look at me and blame me. And I say, if you go and look in the mirror and you don't like what you see, are you going to blame the mirror or are you going to blame the person?
Right.
That
And then what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Yeah.
Exactly. So but it was one of the great joys of my life. I never had more fun creating. It lasted 6 seasons, 81 episodes. I tried to make it there be no trace of it online, not because I am ashamed of it, because I'm not ashamed of it, but I just know like when I move into a different level of thing, I say, yeah, I don't want people to look at this and then say, oh, well, we don't want to work with him because that's controversial and things like that. But I do plan on doing something for the 20th anniversary, which is going to be in 2028 of the first episode. And but that show is to this day, people still say, hey, are you going to bring that back? Are you going to bring it back? Oh, I remember that shit. I remember the episode when the girl did this and the girl did that, and it was just interesting. But
Yeah.
that's where it came from. So it was Dirty Truth Films, and I would tell people, I would say, this is the way I described it. So A Day with Deante is Girls Gone Wild mixed with Jerry Springer, narrated by Howard Stern. So that's basically what the show was about.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's my long-winded way of saying that's where the
Yeah.
dirt came from.
I love that. I love that. What inspired? Okay. So you said Howard Stern, as far as the people who inspired you. What was the reason though? Why did you want to get to the dirty truth? What's the purpose of that?
Because over the course of years, and I'm talking even back in my childhood, I would
Mhm.
always notice that people were holding things back around certain company of people.
Yeah.
And I always felt like, man, the things you're holding back is actually interesting. And they would just be ashamed. And I would say, well, if you're ashamed of holding something back, then why even say it? Especially because like it's not like they would think of it as, oh, well, I'm going to get in trouble or something like that. But I just wanted to just know the truth of things.
Yeah.
But like tell me why, like as kids you're not supposed to say cuss words. Well, tell me why I can't say cuss words, because if you're going to tell me I can't do that, I'm just going to make me want to do it even more. And that's how a lot of people are. Even
Yeah.
teenage girls, I hung around a lot of white girls, and these white girls would say, yeah, my dad, he doesn't like you guys. And when I first heard that, I'm just like, what do you mean you guys? Because like this was kind of new to me. And it was so crazy because I remember when I was 18 years old, I had called this girl named Jessica on the phone, and her father answered. Now I'm still pretty naive because I'm 18 years old. So her father answers me and he says, I said, may I speak with Jessica, please? He says, uh, what are you? And I was like, excuse me? He says, what are
What are
you?
you?
I was like, I'm Jessica's friend. He says, you sound like you're the N word. He says, you sound like you're that. And then I was just like, uh, can I please talk to Jessica? He says, let me ask you a question. What does it feel like to wake up every day and just realize that you're just going to be a Negro again? He didn't say Negro.
Yeah.
So I was so caught off guard by this. I was like, oh my God.
That's
So,
terrible.
but then with my sense of humor, I decided to, in that moment, that I could either get infuriated and end up like in jail or something like that if I get enraged, but I'm a mild mannered person, or I just make comedy out of it. So what I did was I made comedy out of it. So when he asked me that question, I said, look, sir, I was just calling you to just I was calling Jessica to let her know that she left her panties in my back seat.
No, you did not.
I did. And then he was
Oh,
like,
that's freaking amazing.
"You're with Hell's Angels. I'll kick your ass. I'll kick your." And then
Oh.
I just hung up the phone and started laughing.
How
And
old were you when this happened, though?
18. I was
Okay.
18. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I learned pretty quickly because my flavor is the vanilla flavor, right? So and that was something that was a very perpetual and very pervasive thing.
Yeah.
And because of that, I encountered that a lot, and it was so strange because I'd go to these girls' houses. Oh yeah, my dad, you got to be gone when my dad's here. Oh, my grandpa, he doesn't like you guys. And I'm just like, that is so bizarre to me. And so that stuff, because that's like hush hush stuff, I
Yeah.
would put that stuff on the front stage. So
Yeah.
that's why years later, when I did a date with Deante, I'm like, so what do you think of niggers?
Yeah.
you know, and the
Wow.
and the reason why I would do that is because I know that in their household, their grandparents are saying things like this one girl. She told me, she says, you know what my grandfather said. He says that tigers and cats are both cats, but
Mhm.
they don't hang out with each other, and
Right.
that's how it's supposed to be with black and white people. They
Ooh.
should all be humans, but they don't. You're not supposed to hang out with them. So take the advice of the cat and the tiger. They might be the same species, but they don't hang out with each other.
I don't
And
like that.
when this white girl told me that, I said, that just furthers what I already know about what people say behind closed doors. So that's why when I say the dirty truth, there's a truth and then there's a dirty truth. It's like, oh, the truth is, oh yeah, we don't really hang out with that kind. But the dirty truth is, I'm a raging white supremacist with this with the IQ of a rusted out paperclip. That's the dirty truth.
That's sad. And you know what? That's sad. I have a friend she is half Puerto Rican and half Black, and her father, um, he's passed, but he was a police officer,
Yeah.
and I grew up in the whiter part of Omaha, Nebraska, and you know, they lived out there, and her and I were good friends since even before I moved back to Omaha. But she told me of a time, her first time being exposed to racism was when she was pretty young.
Hmm.
And her and her brother and her dad were at, I don't know, it was Burger King, McDonald's, something eating. And she said that this white guy had walked up to their table and was like, "You guys need to go back to where you belong."
Right.
And was just straight up racist, raw, and outwardly loud about it. And, he kept his cool, obviously, because he had his small children with him. I don't know how he would have been. I don't know how he would have been if they weren't there. It wouldn't have been pleasant, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But she just remembered that feeling of, just being like, what's wrong with us? Like, what is he talking about? Like, what's going on? So she had all kinds of questions for him the next day because they left. He took the kids home. I know she has a fear. Her mom had a fear that he went and grabbed his gun because then he left and didn't come back for hours. Um, And I remember her telling me just the fear she had in her. And but it was her first time ever experiencing anything like that. And I think she was probably, I think she said she might have been like 12, 13. And, did you ever have experiences like that younger than, upper teenage years, as far as racist experiences like that?
Not really, and nothing that I can remember. I just know that when I first discovered white girls, it was at my fifth birthday party, which was at McDonald's, and I had went into the bathroom again. I just turned 5 years old. I went into the bathroom, and then there was a little girl in there that was probably about my age, so she was in the wrong bathroom,
Mm,
and she was a white girl, and I was surprised to see that. I was like, wow, this, she's, and then I came out and I told my mother, I said, Ma, I just saw a girl with yellow hair. And then she said, that's blonde. And then I was like, what? And then, this is my thing, is that ever since I was as old as I can remember, I was always fascinated and attracted to things that are different or unusual. And
yeah,
so in my household, we all have the same hair.
yeah,
We have the same skin complexion, but I see this girl, and I don't understand black and white at that point in time. I just see that her hair is soft, it's a different color, her eyes look like a kitten, and
yeah,
our eyes just look like M&Ms, like the brown M&Ms. Not that that's bad, because I like M&Ms, but um, when I saw that, I was just like, wow. So anything like for example, Michael Jackson. I got into Michael Jackson at 5 because not because he was super talented, but because he was different. He was unusual. In a
mhm,
room of celebrities, he looks like the only one that's a celebrity, because where
yeah,
Lionel Richie is wearing a tuxedo and Stevie Wonder is wearing a tuxedo and Michael Jackson is wearing a military jacket with an armband on it and dark shades and a single glove. I'm
mhm,
like, that's cool,
yeah.
So
Do you remember Cyndi Lauper and her song "She's So Unusual"?
I love Cyndi Lauper for that very reason, and
Yes,
we
me
talk
too.
about that a lot. Yeah, because
Yeah.
that album was a her breakout as far as I'm concerned. It
Mhm,
was that had girls just want to have fun, and
mhm.
even to this day, Cyndi Lauper is, she's 73 now.
Yeah, I love Cyndi Lauper. She was one of my favorites when I was young.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
everything about that, and that's why I came to embrace the title esoteric. And people say, "Oh, you're so weird." I say, you know what? Weird is an opinion word. An
Mhm.
actual word is unusual.
Yeah.
And ironically, her album was called "She's So Unusual."
So unusual. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm all about anything that's different. I just gravitate towards it. It's just who I am. It's not like I calculated this. This is just how I showed up in the
Yeah.
world. You
That's
know.
one of the things we have in common is, I'm in the era of my life. I'm going to be 50 soon, and I'm more into learning
Yeah.
about anything and everything that I possibly can. Um, because I feel like in a sense we're all kind of sheltered, and I want to expand my wings. I want to travel more and experience different cultures and to learn all I can about different things. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's that's awesome.
Yeah. If you look at my earrings, I don't know if you can see them, but they're emerald, and
Okay, yeah, I can tell. Yeah.
yeah, and people will be like, "Oh, you're gay." I'm like, "No, I'm not gay," but I like what I like. I
Yeah.
have a pair of earrings right here that I have yet to wear, and they are so cool. If you look at them, they're like this shimmering pink, you know,
Oh yeah.
and it's like, wow, whereas somebody would swear that I'm a homosexual, but in reality, it's
Just
like,
because you're wearing an earring, or is it just because it's got pink in it
yeah.
too? Yeah.
And like what I always say, I said, if it doesn't define you, it can't confine you.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing. And I think a lot of people need to understand that having a better relationship with yourself is
Hmm.
is the real key. And
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter what the public or the community says. And
Yeah.
and that took 1,000 years for me to learn.
Yeah. Well, me too. Me too. It took well into my 40s. And, it all comes back to that self-love and having that self-respect and trying to live within your authentic self and being true to who you are. It doesn't matter what other people say and think of you.
Mhm.
Rather it's in front of you or behind your back. I don't know if I've said this on any of my shows yet, but one of my favorite sayings is, what other people think of me, it's none of my business.
Exactly.
It shouldn't matter, and it doesn't. And I, I had to go through a lot to learn that. I had to go through a lot to learn that.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah. Mm, that's powerful. Yeah. I know it's kind of, she's so unusual. Big fan of Cyndi Lauper. And I didn't even realize that that was why I was so attracted to her as an artist. When I was younger, I didn't realize that until, gosh, I think I talked about it and realized it when I was in treatment myself.
Yeah.
Um, and it was because she was so different, but yet she wore it well and she was confident and she, I just, I loved her. I loved her. And I think the reason I loved her so much was because I always felt different. I always had that feeling when I was young that I didn't belong anywhere because, the way I grew up was different than most people, all the abuse I endured. Um, and there was a shame factor in that, knowing in my head and in my heart that that shame didn't belong to me, but it's still there. It's still there. And then growing into all the different addictions I've had at different times before I got into recovery, that gives you that different feeling as well. And that not only the difference, but the shame factor, because it's like you don't want to be that way. And you're doing it anyways, and that's why I said in the intro, getting up again and again and again. Sometimes we have to, that resilience. You got to find that resilience in you to be able to rise and to overcome
Yeah.
and to heal and to heal. I couldn't maintain any kind of recovery in any of my addictions um until I did that inner work, that healing work that I had to do from all my traumas, from, all of the abuse, all of the neglect, all of, you know, just my life, my childhood, my whole entire childhood, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And you're right on.
yeah. Deante, I just love you. You've become one of my good friends. I just wanted to tell you that.
Oh, well, like I said, I appreciate you. You're exceptional. I feel grateful and blessed to even know you. I mean,
Mm,
it's a long ways from Nebraska to Ohio. So,
I know. And
you
we're going to meet in person this summer. I
yeah,
promise you that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And since that was a promise, where we're going to meet is the promised land. That's what we're going to do. Whatever land we're standing on, we're going to call it the promised land.
All right. Rather it's where you're at, or rather it's in where I'm at, or maybe we'll meet somewhere in the middle. Who knows? We'll,
Exactly.
we'll figure it out in our plan. So I'm going to go ahead and announce that my first book I'm publishing, it's going to be released on my 50th birthday next month.
Wow.
I'm excited. I'm excited. You knew that, so don't act like you're surprised.
I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised. Like, seriously. I
Yeah.
mean, just because you already know something doesn't mean you're not surprised. If someone told me they bought me a Mercedes yesterday and I knew about it, and then they bring it up again today, I'm gonna be like, oh yes, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what? So, what can you tell me about books? Because I don't really know much about books. What can you tell me about your
Mm, that's pretty funny because you're helping me in the process. You are not only my friend, you're like a mentor and coach to me, and you're helping me in the process. With your Dirty Truth Publishing company. So my first book is going to be my story. It's going to be, but more than that, and more importantly than that, it's going to be my message. It's
Mm,
going to be, how to overcome, how to, my brand is Rise of the Phoenix Coach, and it's going to be how I healed. It's going to be about, it's going to give a lot of tips. It's going to be kind of a how-to, a self-help in a sense book as well. So there's going to be story in it. There's going to be a lot of tips. There's going to be all of that, how to maintain recovery and, getting to our dirty truth, because that is the root of where any destructive behavior comes from, you
Yeah.
know? And that's what we have to work on healing uh, before we're able to maintain recovery. And, and I don't even like a lot of these lingo words like recovery and addiction and all of these things, trauma even, I say I'm a trauma informed coach, but I don't even like the word trauma because everything has some kind of a notation to it, a meaning, and, things can be twisted. And, what I'm about is helping people. I feel like my pains have a purpose, and it's to help people, as many and whoever I can in any way. The life experiences I've had, I'm like this old soul who sometimes I think like I'm wiser beyond my years. I'm a pretty smart cookie. Yep, I've had my hands in some different jars.
Well, I tell you one thing. I've never met a smart cookie because if they were truly smart, they would get away from my hands. I'm going to assassinate those cookies.
Oh, goodness.
I don't know any smart cookies, but I know a lot of dumb cookies.
Oh, that's funny. You're silly. All right. Well, what else do you want to talk about today?
Well, this is your show. You tell me.
Oh, no. I like the conversation. That's one thing I love about you is we always, it's real. It's raw. It's unfiltered. It's one of the things I love about you.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like now the co-host.
Yeah. Well, I don't like the word. I don't even like the word interview. I think sometimes some of the best conversations people have is, when it's just natural.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna boost a little bit here. I'm super excited, super excited. And for a while, I was saying, by the end of the year, by the end of 2026, and then I had even caught myself saying recently, since we're into 2026 pretty far, within the year, I'm going to publish my book within the year. And one of my biggest flaws still to this day, character defects, whatever you want to call it, is I'm a procrastinator. I'm a procrastinator. I've done so much healing and have healed so many things in me, but I'm far from perfect. I am 100% far from perfect. The only thing, and I stress this a lot with people too, is to not compare yourself to other people. The only person we should ever compare ourselves to is who I was yesterday, or maybe the year before, or the decade before, and always strive to better yourself. And it's not for other people, it's for ourselves, to be able to grow into our authentic self. And being our authentic selves means being able to live with a sense of peace within us. And to be able to love life, to love ourselves, love other people, and to just be able to be genuinely happy. Not saying life doesn't happen. Life happens, um, everybody goes through adversities. Everybody does. Nobody has had a perfect life. Rather it's something as my parents got divorced or the death of a loved one, or, those are everyday occurrences that everybody goes through. And those can, in a sense, be traumatic to people. Trauma does not have to be as in depth as what I went through. So that's why I say I want to help people overcome those adversities that life throws at you. Everybody gets that.
No, I mean you're on the right path for sure.
Yeah.
And you talk about, since you are trying to rope me into being your
co-host.
Yeah. I just always want to share that it's so important for us to share our stories, because like in my new book, one of the people said, it's one of my quotes, is that we have to share our stories, because if we don't, then the statistics are not going to be believed. And
Yeah.
I can show my official copy, Gift to Your Legacy. But
Yeah.
The importance of it is not just your story, but really the dirty truth version of your story, your formation. How did you come to be the person you are when you were the person that you were before. That's the thing that's so important. And it's not just sharing it, but it's preserving it. That's what I just completely and totally endorse that way of thinking, because so many people are just losing it. As a matter of fact, my next book, they always say it's more impressive to write 10 books on the same topic said different ways than it is to write 10 different books about 10 different topics.
Yeah.
And that's how you're creating a category of one. Well, in
Mm.
my case, I'm thinking about doing another book that's called Stop Burning and Burying Your Stories, meaning when you get cremated, you're burning your stories. When you get buried, you're burying your stories, because people are just not understanding the value of how they came to be.
Right.
And, and it's such a problematic thing. When I did my first book, which is the FUCK, Your Insecurities, I
Hmm.
did that because I got to a point where I was able to manage my insecurities, not overcome them. I don't think you can,
Yeah.
but I was able to manage my insecurities at a high level, and I felt so empowered. I said, man, I want to give
Amazing.
to someone else, because they always say when you learn something, you should immediately teach it to someone else. And when I learned that, wow, I don't feel how I felt before, when I was just so filled with limiting beliefs. I felt like that I was worthless. I felt like every girl was too good for me and every guy was better than me. And then I got to a place where I realized through lived experience, my evolved perspective was, you know what? No matter who you are, you could be Beyonce, Miss America, you could be whoever got the best body, the most money. You still have some things in your mind that you doubt about yourself. You still are jacked up in your own ways. So
Yeah.
instead of me thinking about myself at a lower rung, I need to understand that every last one of us, no matter what our net worth or what our physical appearance is, we are the exact same people when it comes to, I'm not really sure about myself today. And that's why I say there's a big difference between self-esteem and self-worth.
Yeah.
Self-esteem is what you have when you look good in a certain shirt or something, and you say, I look good in this shirt, and you feel like $1 million. But when you take it off, now you're back to filling in the dumps. That's fleeting. So that's fickle, is
Yeah.
self-esteem. But self-worth is always there. Your awareness of it is what fluctuates.
Yeah.
So as an example, when you think of self-worth, it's the sum total of what you've meant to people in this world from the time you were born all throughout.
Mhm.
It's at the beginning of all of our lives, there's a great chance that we made somebody's life better. Whether
Yeah.
it was a family member, whether it was a sibling, whether it was someone who just saw the little cute little baby at the grocery store. You made
Hmm.
that 60-year-old person smile. You
Yeah.
don't know, because you were just 2 weeks old and you were in your mom's arms or someone's arm. So that's why I say really, really focus on your birthdays and the value of your birthday, because that is the day that the world was introduced to you. That's your world premiere. And
Hmm.
everything you've done in your life, whether it was being helpful to someone, being a home healthcare agent, helping people in nursing homes, helping people as a kindergarten teacher, or whatever you've done, you've helped.
Hmm.
So that means the day that you came into this world, you became a person that was going to do a lot of good in the world. So I say confidence is overrated and courage is more important.
I agree.
And that's what I talk about in FUCK, Your Insecurities. Also, my book, Face It, You're Toxic. My book, Winning is for Losers, tells you how to understand that you can win 100% of the time just by disallowing yourself to take yourself out of the running of being able to possibly do something. You
Right.
don't need to succeed in the sense of, oh, I completed this. You need to succeed in the sense of, I'm going to let myself try. And
Yeah.
if
Try.
yeah. So that's what that's about. My book, Stick with Your Own Kind, is about connecting with the people that you want to be around. If you want to be a knucklehead, stick with 10 knuckleheads. If you want to be a person of value, then hang out with a person of value. Stick with your own kind. If you want to be successful, don't hang around knuckleheads. You're not sticking with your own kind. I
Right.
use the title, a very controversial title, because a police officer told me when I was 18, also when I was 18, that I have to stick with my own kind, because I was at this white girl's house, and he told me he was going to cite me and tow my vehicle if that ever happened again. Now again, that's me using a negative into and turning it into a positive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with your own kind. Then my fifth book is Speak Before You Think. Instead of just thinking before you speak, because when you think before you speak, I say, "How you doing?" You're like, "Oh, I can't pay these bills," or "I traffic was horrible.
Right. Overthinking.
Wife is cheating on me." But when you speak before you think and you get clear on how you want to show up, I want to show up with optimism and gratitude, which is
Yeah.
what this tattoo says on my arm.
Mhm.
Optimism and gratitude. So I immediately say, someone say, "How are you doing?" I say, "Oh, blessed." See, I
Mhm.
spoke before I thought, because if I start thinking about things, I'm gonna come up with negative things.
Oh
Now
yeah.
now if you want to do that, that's fine, but you go and stick with your own kind.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's, I have 10 books. Those are the first five. And I just feel like it's very, very important. So all of those books I did, the first five especially, was me sharing some part of my story,
Yeah.
because the story that we have is going to be unique. I like telling stories outside the frame when I ghostwrite for people, when
Mhm.
I do authorized biographies, or even make documentaries for people. I like to do all that stuff outside the frame. So I don't go for the highlight moments. I go to the little moments that we often overlook, and it
Mhm.
all us into who we are.
I
You know,
think a lot of people kind of overlook those things and don't realize the significance it brings into their life,
yeah, they don't even. Yep,
especially immediately.
because they don't realize that this thing that happened when you were 8 years old, or this quote that your grandmother gave you, they don't realize how important that is. For example, with me, my grandfather told me, he said that his father said to him that he needs to go out and have a strong back and a weak mind. So that's horrible, right? But
Yeah. It's
because
opposite. Should be the opposite.
But see, my whole thing is, okay, my grandfather was born in 1933. He was probably raised by someone who was born in like 1910. So that's great advice for somebody in the first half of the 20th century. But
Yeah.
the good thing about my grandfather saying that and telling me a part of his formation story is that I was able to grasp the idea of discernment, which means that just because someone's older than you doesn't mean that they know what's good for you. So
Right.
the skill of discernment is what
Mhm.
helped me understand that, well, I'm not going to have a strong back and a weak mind. I'm going to have a strong mind and a back that's going to keep me upright. And I'm going to do things in the world that go far beyond just being a factory worker, because that was his limited vision being born in 1933, as being a factory worker. He always said, you got to work in a factory. And I said, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But
Good for you. Good for you. Because I kind of got some of the opposite advice. Some of my family was just happy I graduated high school, you
exactly.
know.
And
Yeah.
my stepfather one time told me, he says, "Yeah, you need to go and get a factory job. They're paying $14 an hour." Now this was back in 2005, and I told him, I
Not
said,
bad money in 2005.
I know. I said, I'm gonna write books, and then he said, he just kind of laughed at that, and I said, it's okay, because like Tyler Perry said, he said his mother, the limited vision his mother had for him was that if he can get to making $300 a week, that would be a beautiful life. But Tyler Perry says to this day, she supported everything about him, but that was her limited vision for what he could do, because no one has the vision that you have, and that's why it's important for us to share our stories, because you never know what you can get from someone. And that's why when I preserve people's stories, I like to do it not only as a family operating system for when they're gone and for their heirs, but also because it gives all the rest of us what I call a public inheritance. And a public inheritance is where we all inherit your lived experiences, the ups and downs and the turnarounds. My pastor, Wayne Dawson, who was a friend of mine, and I also was my first ghostwriting client, he says to me, we need to share our losses and we need to share our challenges and setbacks, because when we share our wins, we create competition. But when we share
Mhm.
losses and setbacks, we create community. And
Yeah.
that's exactly true.
Yeah. We need to focus on how we're similar.
Yep.
The world I feel like is so divided, and I'm not even gonna get into how all that happens, or why, but it's unfortunate, all the division, that is in our world today. We need to focus on, everyone wants to feel seen and to feel like they matter to a degree,
Yeah.
you know. The division in the world does the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to feel appreciated. Everyone wants to feel loved,
Yeah.
and being kind doesn't cost anything, you know. not looking at the superficial. What's inside is what matters more. How a person, I'm someone who is going to judge somebody more. I don't like to say that I'm judging anybody, but I'm going to look at somebody and determine a little bit about them more by how they treat the wait staff, how they treat, at work. I talk the same and have just as much appreciation for the housekeepers and the laundry staff as I do my boss. I treat them the same because not one is more important than the other.
Exactly.
It's a team effort.
Yeah. And if you think about it, the value of telling your story is really all over the place, because think about it, when you're a coach or you're a consultant, where do you get the information from that you're teaching? From some part of your story.
Mhm.
If you're coaching someone on how to, let's say, okay, I just hired a web designer. Okay, so this web designer is coaching me on how to do this, or they're going to do it. Well, where did that come from? Well, at some point in their life, they became interested in becoming a web designer, or something put them in that position, whether against their will or something they wanted to do willingly. Either way, it's a story that's worth being heard, because you just never know what it might do for you.
Yeah.
And even when you say what you say about you treat the wait staff the same as you treat the CEO, like, yeah, that to me, there's a reason why. There's something that was put into you, and you may not even know it, but something was put into you to make you be that specific type of person.
Yeah. And I know exactly what it is. It's because I didn't have the
Yeah,
kindness, the compassion, all of that growing up, like a lot of people do have. Not everyone, because I know I'm not the only one out there who's suffered abuse, but it's because I lacked that.
yeah,
And so I don't want other people to have to go through some of that pain that I went through. That's why I'm passionate about what I do and my message and helping people, is because it was awful at times. My life was absolutely 100% awful at times.
yeah.
you know um and I remember a conversation we had once about, you said something about me being an expert, and I was like, I'm not an expert in anything. And I remember you said everybody's an expert in some of their own life experiences.
Yeah, well, you're an expert just because, think of it this way. If you were to, let's say you were 3 years old,
Mhm.
and you were talking to your 1 year old brother. Well, you are an expert at tying shoes to a 1 year old when you're
Yeah,
three.
yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah,
all you
I
need
had
to
to really think about that though, because I always thought, not, but a lot of that played into my low self-esteem that I'd had at the time. Like, not that I had that low of a self-esteem when we first met, but just plays into the I'm not good enough, or I'm not, that low self-esteem I had most of my life.
yeah.
Yeah.
Expertise doesn't mean you know everything, because nobody knows everything.
Right.
Because
Nobody's perfect.
if that was the case, we would not have, continuing education and things of that nature. So it's all about just knowing, just being a little bit further ahead than the next person.
Yeah.
If you only know addition and subtraction, but you don't know anything about multiplication and division, then you're an expert to me if I only know addition, because
Yeah.
you addition and subtraction.
Yeah.
See, you don't have to know multiplication and division to be an expert. You're an expert to me
Yeah.
because you're a little bit ahead of me.
Right.
And that works the same way with everything. It's just like the discrimination of racism, like you were saying.
Mhm.
My daughter, who is now 20, she's gonna be 23 years old, but when she was 3 years old, she said something to me that made me understand the ridiculousness of racial discrimination forever. I
What
think I,
you
I don't know if I told you this. Listen, again, remember, she's 3 years old.
Mhm.
So, we're at home together, and then she says, "Daddy, I'm hungry." I said, "Okay, you want me to make you a hot dog?" Because at the time she loved eating hot dogs. So
Yeah.
I made her a hot dog, and then she says, "Yeah." I said, "What do you want on it? Do you want ketchup and mustard?" She says, "I want ketchup, but I don't want mustard." I said, "Why don't you want mustard?" She said, "Because it's so yellow." And then I started laughing. I said, "So what does that have to do with how it tastes?" And she just shrugged her shoulders. So that's the same thing as racism.
Mhm.
The fact that somebody is a certain color, like that yellow mustard, means that you got a problem with them, but you can't really explain to me why with anything that makes sense.
Right.
You can give me some reasons, but you can't give me one good reason.
Right.
So when she said that, I said, I'll never forget that you said this, because this is a teaching moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she won't
Absolutely.
she won't remember that now, but she couldn't even tell me why. Because think about it.
She apparently didn't like the color yellow.
Well, think of it this way: that yellow mustard could have tasted the same as ketchup,
Mm-hmm.
and she still would have had a problem with it, but not with the ketchup,
Yeah.
because it's all about the difference in color. But it's
Yeah.
the same thing if you decide, because it's all you gotta do is just put food coloring in it, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Everything else would have been the same. So that's how you sum up the ridiculousness of racial discrimination.
Yeah. I like that story. That's cute.
Yeah,
It's a very
exactly.
good teaching moment for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my friend. I'm
So
just excited. I'm glowing. Am I glowing? No, my
uh,
light's not very good right now,
you're,
but I'm glowing. And
you're
I want to thank you for that, because you know, one of the reasons that I love you so much is because you are my people. You are the type of people I need to surround myself with. Someone who is going to be encouraging, someone who is going to lift me up, someone who helps me to believe in myself. You know, you are a prime example of the positive type of people I need in my life.
Well, I think I told you this before. And first of all, thank you for that. But I think I told you this before. There's two types of people in this world.
Hmm.
There's lifters and there's leaners. And the lifters, they lift you up and they reaffirm you. They tell you that you're capable of doing this. They root you on. They celebrate you. Those are the lifters. The leaners are the ones that lean on you and suck the life out of you. And they're jealous of you. They're envious of you. And secretly, they're behind your back saying those things behind your back. And this is what I call them: secret admirers, because they secretly admire you, but they come off as they hate you.
Yeah.
That's
They're mirroring things in you that they don't like about themselves.
exactly, and that's why it's okay. It's okay to be that. And I've gotten so much great advice over the course of time, and that's me sharing my stories with people. And so just remember this: you're never down. You're either up or you're getting up.
Yeah.
So don't ever think, oh, I'm down in the dump. Like, no, you're never down. You're either up or you're getting up.
Right.
And that's what's
One
so
thing I tell people too is if you've fallen 5 times, that's okay. As long as you get back up, as long as the times you have gotten up are one more
yeah,
than the times you've fallen, because I've been flat on the floor several times,
yep.
but the resilience in me, and it's not all me. I feel like I've been blessed. I've been giving opportunities. And it's come from a power and a strength greater than myself, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
I always stand firm with my faith, and I think that that's so important. The Lord is magical, and
mhm.
I feel like that. When you have a praying life, and I try to elevate my praying life, every day. I
Yeah.
just that great things happen.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, just keep rising, keep getting up, never give up. Don't, and that's part of my message is and why I tell my story and why I'm passionate about it is I want to instill hope and inspiration and motivation for people that a better life is possible. It is possible.
You got that right.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause,
Anybody.
my life got better when I met my wife, Mrs.
Mm.
Mrs. Billy Joe Young.
Miss BJ. Tell
Yeah,
her I said hello.
yeah, she's fantastic, and that's the thing about it, is that you've heard me say this ad nauseum: go where you're celebrated. And
Yes.
and that's what I like. The foundation of my life, of course, it starts with my faith with God, but also everything trickles down from that. And
Mhm.
you can customize your environment instead of saying, oh man, you're such a negative person. What I learned is that don't get mad about people being negative. Let them be who they are, right?
Right.
Let them be that. So it's
Accept
the
them
fact
for
that
who they are.
the fact that they're negative is not the problem. Your proximity to them is what's the problem.
Right.
And so I've learned that over the course of time. And so now I've customized my environment to where I stick with my own kind. And
Yeah.
those are people that are uplifters, that are optimistic, that are, listen, there's a big difference between being a negative person and having a negative moment.
Yes.
Because that's the thing. We're all human, of course.
Mhm.
But like I said before, my whole thing is I employ in my book, Winning is for Losers, I have a thing called the 90% rule. And so the 90% rule means I only want to hang around people where there's a 90% chance I'm never going to regret hanging out with them. There are
Yeah.
some people where there's only a 10% chance that, that I'm going to not regret. So I try to be around people, and everyone that I'm around, it's like 99.9% that I'm not going to regret being in their presence, because I cherry pick these people and say, okay, this person is a force for good. Steve Harvey said, people that want you to win, they will help you do it.
Yeah.
And if you don't know who the people are that you should be having in your life, in your orbit, then you need to really look at it that way and say, okay, who is helping me win?
Yeah.
Because people that truly want to see you win, they will definitely help you. They're not going to be indifferent. They're not going to just say, oh, good luck. No, they're not going to do that. They're going to actually be a part of the process. They're
Yeah.
going to help you. They're going to say, what can I do? They're going to give you advice. They're going to tell you, this is what my lived experience taught me about this. That's
Right.
when you know that those are the people you should surround yourself. Unless you want to be a knucklehead, in which case just go to knucklehead.com and you can find plenty of people like that.
Yeah, right. Well, I know in my case, I have family members that I have to kind of just choose to love from a distance. Do I wish harm or hate on them? No, absolutely not. I still care about them deeply, but I have to love them from a distance because, they have made decisions about me and have placed judgments on me that, they've kind of they were the ones who actually made the decision that I wasn't going to be a part of their life. And so I had to accept that. Do I wish harm on them or hate them, or, do I resent them? I used to. I'll be honest. I used to. Yeah, 100%. But I'm past that. I don't, I choose. It's a choice. Your attitude it's a choice. Am I going to wish hate or wish bad things on somebody? No.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely not.
So you're a force for good. That's why you're in my orbit.
Yeah, you're definitely in my orbit.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very
Well,
excited about this book, though, so I know this is going to be great. You got to tell me all about how it goes when you do it.
you will know. We will be in touch on the regular.
It's exciting.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up today, I think. If something in this episode has resonated with you, it's not by accident. Your story isn't over. No matter where you are right now, you're still capable of rising. If you're ready to go deeper, come join me on Substack at riseofthephoenixcoach.substack.com. This is where I share some more of my story, my tools, and my real insights. And if you're looking to work together, you can always visit my webpage at riseofthephoenixcoach.com to learn more about Rise of the Phoenix Coach with one-on-one coaching, where we rebuild confidence, reignite inner strength, and rise up to a life of peace, love, and true happiness. And if this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That's how this movement will grow, is one story, one voice, and one rise at a time. Until next time, stay grounded and stay aware and keep rising. All right. Goodbye, everybody. How do I stop recording?
That's hilarious.
I know.
That is hilarious.
Mhm.
How do I stop